Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to the webinar today. Our guest, Andrew Schear, is founder of Bloomfield Networks, a technology consulting firm with a home office in New Jersey. Bloomfield specializes working with professional service firms and works with mid-sized law firms across the country. I'm a partner in a mid-sized law firm, and I don't think anyone will be surprised to hear me say that lawyers, especially older ones like me, are not the most tech-savvy group. This makes having a tech resource like Andrew's firm essential to the smooth automated operations needed to run a lean, efficient firm. Let me mangle a quote from John Kennedy. He said in so many words, the American government was designed by geniuses so it could be run by idiots. Speaking for myself, any tech system I use in my law firm better be designed by geniuses. So Andrew has worked with LeanLaw clients and has done a great job for us. So Andrew Schear, welcome to the Future Firm.
Thanks so much, Gary. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So my name's Gary Allen, and we're here today to talk about using the apps that you love in your law firm. So I'm going to have a conversation with Andrew for about 30 minutes with 15 minutes set aside for questions. Allison Elliott is running the technology and helping to process questions. So Andrew, to set the stage, tell us a little bit about your background in your business.
Sure. So my background is in the IT consulting space. I started out in at the earliest parts of my career, working in banking and credit unions and things like that, and helping them out with all their basic IT needs, as well as implementing compliance controls. And that really set the stage for, me to work with law firms as an industry, just with the sensitivity that banking has associated with it, and needing to understand the urgency and sensitivity around clients' files and things like that. And through that, I worked in a few different places as a consultant, built out offices, implemented software tools, things of that nature. And in 2018, I started Bloomfield Networks to, do more of that in our way and, try to deliver the best service that we can.
Awesome. Thank you. So now let's talk about how your firm works with law firms. So where do you think your firm provides the greatest value to law firms?
So our firm provides the greatest value to law firms with general technology management and oversight, right? So really, as a small firm, even a 20 to 30 person firm, you might not have the budget or the desire to have an in-house technology resource. So we come in and, in an authoritative way, own the technology function at the firm to, make the high level decisions about, with you, of course, what software tools need to be used, implementing Office 365, implementing all the security controls like, multi-step authentication and conditional access within 365, and assisting you with budgeting all your software expenses, your hardware lifecycle replacements, and all the day-to-day things that come up. People say my Outlook won't open, my printer won't print, whatever the case might be. It is in as few words how we work.
Right. So how many firms do you work with where you don't visit the office that are sort of remote as opposed to local?
Most actually.
Yeah.
So out of about 50 clients, we can go days or weeks without necessarily visiting a on-site office. And a lot of our work is done remotely.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I figured. The clients that you've worked with for us have all been remote.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So what have law firms asked you to do that's not really in your sweet spot? What don't you do?
So anything, right, that involves really like running the firm, right? So,
Mhm.
analyzing financial reports or you know, paralegal type tasks, right? We're meant to be the high level 30,000 feet, support to implementing these complex tools. And typically we look to work with a champion at the firm who, really understands the day to day and the trenches type deals.
Mhm. So we just had this conversation the other day, but you can do data transition also for
Absolutely,
law
yeah.
firms? Yeah,
So
okay.
so that could be, let's say you're, we could use LeanLaw as an example, right? Maybe you are looking to move to LeanLaw, but you're anxious because you have all this historical time entries and stuff like that. In your in your old system, whether that's Time Matters or Juris or any other old platform. We can work with that vendor to get the data out, and then with LeanLaw to get the data in and own that process from end to end.
So you work with many law firms. What gets you most excited about working with law firms?
um I think it's hard to say. There's so many things, but just that it's always an interesting, the attorneys are always doing exciting things, and it's a fast-paced environment to work in, and it's very rewarding when things go well.
Mhm. So what's your biggest frustration working with law firms?
um Honestly, it's attorneys that, they think maybe they don't want to move forward, right? They don't want to
Mhm.
learn the newest technology because the old one, worked for however long, and that's what I know, and whatever the case may be. Even though, the newer products might save them time or make them more money or, do any number of positive things for their firm. Just kind of an attitude of not wanting to learn new ways of doing things is definitely the number one most frustrating thing. Fortunately, we've been lucky with a lot of our clients that hasn't been the case, but I've definitely come across it in my career.
Right, right. It's you're dealing with a lot of the leaders in these firms can be older, like
Yeah.
me, which
Yes.
and you just don't change as easily after a certain
Hmm.
period, and then you're dealing with lawyers who are not necessarily the most change oriented.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so let's talk a little. I want to turn a little bit to have a few questions about kind of technology foundations in law firms so
Okay.
that we sort of get a baseline with our audience here about what we're talking about. So let's talk about cloud versus on-premise software. Are there any reasons at this date to stay with on-premise software for a law firm?
Not really, especially for remote work, which is, so common now.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's very limited reasons, unless it's tied into, other legacy applications that need to be looked at. With everybody spread out, it's not as needed or common anymore.
And so, um, so I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. So, if a firm, uh, how many firms do you run into that have not made that transition? Have you helped make that happen?
Yeah. So, many firms at this point are, using, some kind of cloud-based app, but we're still finding people that have Windows 7, which, was supposed to be removed almost 4 years ago. So there's definitely people out in the wild that still haven't really caught up.
Right. Right, exactly. Now, one time we heard a lot that on-premise applications were more secure than
Mhm.
cloud applications. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, so that what that argument comes from is, for years and years and years, leading up to and even going into 2020, when everybody shifted to work from home, the concept was that, your office was the perimeter, right? You wanted to secure the perimeter, and then everything inside of that, maybe didn't really matter, or, wasn't as much of a priority to protect. But the modern approach is really zero trust, right? And what does that mean? So that means that I want to secure the computer, not necessarily the perimeter of my office in the same way. And I want to assume everything around my computer is hostile. So zero trust. I don't trust anything. And if that is really the shift, the paradigm shift that enables going to cloud-based applications, because cloud-based applications work, they're in a data center and you're wherever you are, right? So whatever is going on at your office kind of goes out the window as it relates to security, because you're reaching out to that third-party source instead of something on premise.
Exactly. So what other advantages are there to moving to the cloud?
So a big one is scalability. If you're, purchasing a dedicated server to run something on site and you start to outgrow it, then you're getting into another capital expense of buying the server, the labor, switching, all of that. But many cloud-based platforms, scale up and down automatically. So, if LeanLaw, for example, onboarded 1,000 new, users, then the data center capacity there is, for the purposes of our conversation, it's infinite, that they could, scale up all the servers and memory and storage that is needed to support that type of load. But your on-premise resources are limited to whatever was purchased at the time that you bought it. Additionally, the difference between the on-premise investment versus a cloud software product, the on-premise requires the large capital outlay of, I need to buy a server, I need to buy licensing, I need to, pay somebody to set all of it up, and then my business will be impacted however things are changed. But the cloud-based product is more of is an OpEx, more of an operating expense of, this is what it costs to have billing every month. And
Right.
if there's a problem, then I know the team at LeanLaw is going to fix it, and I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to secure it in the same way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to do one more background thing here, which is I want to introduce two approaches to building the law firm tech stack. First, we hear a lot about all-in-one software in the legal world, and I've been using supposedly all-in-one practice management systems for decades as a lawyer. So the idea here is that you build around a many-featured practice management software. I mean, it's not really all-in-one. I mean, everybody's using Microsoft or Google or various other foundational apps, but and there may be other third-party accounting things. But the idea is you fit as much as you can into one legal specific application. The other concept I want to introduce is what we call best of breed. So the idea here is to build around the foundational apps like MS 365, QuickBooks Online as one that we work very closely with, to take advantage of all the broad functionality and app stores and people who know how to use the apps, and then integrate niche apps to customize for law firms. So as I mentioned, we customize QuickBooks Online for law firms for timekeeping, billing, reporting, and accounting features. And the idea is to add the best app for each function, hence the best of breed. And sorry for the long introduction, but I'd just like you to give us your thoughts on each of those approaches.
Yeah, of course. So, a big thing about, using some of the other big name apps, right, is they try to be everything, right? And that, that really starts to get old when they're not good at every single thing, right? And if if you take an application like LeanLaw, for example, that does a great job at, time and billing and invoicing and integration with QuickBooks, LeanLaw doesn't try to be your file storage system, right? It doesn't try to be, all these other things, but it does try to be an excellent time and billing system. So, the approach would be just to, look at what you know and the needs of your firm, right? And try to put together the best stack of tech that makes sense for you, rather than trying to shoehorn your firm into, one thing that does everything, because it often doesn't do everything well.
Right. Yeah, we hear that a lot from, people coming to us. And just to, kind of tell the story, the background of that is a little bit is we probably started LeanLaw thinking we're going to build a better Clio.
Right.
And we started getting into it and we went, whoa, there's a lot to do just on the financial side of things. And now 7, 8 years later, we're still going, there's still a lot to do just to kind of master the financial side of the law firm without trying to take on all these other things. My own view is the market just isn't big enough for somebody to build everything well that they would have to build. And, you'd need a Microsoft sized company to do that. And that nobody's going to build that company for a niche market.
Right.
So let's turn to the main event here. Let's talk about the technology that you love for law firms. So what's great? Where is there room for improvement? Let's just start with Microsoft 365 since that's come up a few times.
Yeah. So, I definitely, bar none, right now Office 365 seems to be the best product that you can get. It covers your instant messaging, video meetings, bookings, email, all these good things that are done very well because it does take a Microsoft-sized company to do that. But also, as your email provider, it's so important because everybody's so dependent on your email, and that email is such a target that you have the best security controls that you can get available to you. So, conditional access, two-factor authentication, good audit logging of sign-ins and things like that. So starting with 365, it's definitely a, hotly recommended item for law firms particularly.
Yeah, okay. Let's dig into it a little bit more because there is so much buried in Microsoft
Yes.
365. There's so much going on that I feel like it can be hard to know everything that it can do. I mean, email, obviously, nobody is going to create their own word processor. So Word
Right.
is a given. But, what about like there's some of the aspects of Microsoft Teams and, the case management aspect of MS 365. What can it do along those lines?
So I think that the question is kind of like what, how depends how you need to use it and your type of practice area, right? Because, if you're a small firm, you might be able to get pretty far. You might be able to get pretty far with different trackers in Excel that you build that work for you. And as it relates to case management, different alerts out of Microsoft Teams and things like that could also be helpful.
He seems very
Now,
clear too.
if I recall, you helped with an installation of Epona.
No, actually, we haven't touched on that yet.
You have not touched on Epona. Okay, this is a tool that helps to configure SharePoint for law firm document management and things like that. So sorry, I thought you had worked on one of those installations.
Yeah, we spoke about it, and actually I'm glad you brought it up because even though I can't, speak from my personal experience about it, I am aware of what you're talking about. And that really is one of the closest things to basically making case management within Office 365 through that add-on. Even though I'm not 100% knowledgeable about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So thinking about, document management, there's a huge, function in a law firm. What's your experience with firms trying to use what's in like OneDrive and what's in MS365 versus attaching a separate document management system, especially as a firm gets a little bit larger?
It has a lot to do with the type of work that the firm does, but it can definitely be positive, right? If it's all set up correctly. So, SharePoint, right? You can do individual document IDs, right, automatically. You can do permissions on your shares, version control, all these basic features for document management without getting into the, $10,000+ annual expense of something like iManage. So for many firms, it is not only, it's good enough, but it's also good,
Right.
without spending, significant money. But if you're a firm that's, day in, day out in litigation and, completely live in documents and stuff like that, or due diligence, then you might get into something like that. But many firms do very well with just Office 365 or Office plus Apona.
Can you talk a little bit more about where that line is? For a firm, where that line is for a firm, what do they, what kind of features do they need at a certain point that OneDrive doesn't provide particularly well?
That's a good question. I think that line is truly a moving target for for every firm, right? Because firms, what they need today, if they grow, they might need something else. And yeah, so it depends.
Yeah, understood. Now, the firms that you work with, are any of them using Google Workspace as opposed to Microsoft?
Could you repeat that?
Just wondering if you work with firms that work with Google Workspace as opposed to MS365.
Yeah, it's not as common, but it is it's definitely a thing that people do use that, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I find it's better for smaller firms if there's a high level of familiarity around Gmail and stuff like that. But Office 365 is more of an enterprise product with better control.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. I mean, our LeanLaw uses Google as well, and keeping track of all the permissions and things in a way that is secure is not an easy thing.
Correct.
I assume Microsoft does that much better.
Yeah. But that again too comes back to management. Like, it takes a good IT, professional to look at your business and segment things into shares and put users into groups and, make all that work as well as it can. But it's a lot of work to keep organized no matter where you are.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay. Well, unless you have other thoughts about that part of the workflow, let's talk about accounting.
Yes.
So, well, first talk about QuickBooks. Do you have a lot of firms that use QuickBooks? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it?
So, for the most part, right, I think, just like in the beginning of our presentation, I was saying that, Office 365 is very much the de facto, solution. The accounting solution is pretty much QuickBooks as well. And for many years, it was QuickBooks Desktop. But just like everybody else, they're very much on the subscription software model. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's now that it is the default, we can say that that's pretty much the standard tool that any small firm can use and pick up and work. And also it's known, right? It's known by many accountants and understood about how to do it and work it, and that makes the relationship with LeanLaw more harmonious because your accountant doesn't necessarily have to learn a new tool. It complements their work. It doesn't work against them.
One of the things we really like is that that you don't have to have your accountant in your town either. Right. You can hire somebody from anywhere and to work on your books.
Right.
That makes, and there are only so many really legal savvy accountants out there. So it can be very helpful to have a real expert on law
Yeah,
firm accounting, particularly when you've got the tricky stuff like trust accounting to deal with.
definitely. And
Yeah.
that's one area too where with as it relates to accounting, the reporting, right, that you get out of LeanLaw and how that dovetails with the reporting you get out of QuickBooks, that is as I was saying before, it complements them, but also I think it would be good to just call some attention to the Accounting Pro Network. If you needed another perspective, or if you wanted an accountant who knew the product, and more importantly knew law firms,
Right.
that's a resource that is available through LeanLaw.
I'm interested in what other accounting solutions you work with and how
Um,
do they work for law firms?
So the vast majority of, when we come in for the first time, we find a lot of people are still making invoices in Word and just manually sending them out. And, that gets old, in my opinion, really fast. But also if you think about the reporting aspects of that, right? How can with any degree of confidence, what your accounts receivable is, and what your collections are, right? When you use a software tool that integrates with your accounting system, you're cutting out so much manual work of recreating those invoices and revising them and having them filter into in a reportable way. So that's the most common thing. But outside of that, there's a couple people that are still using Sage, Peachtree, and stuff like that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
QuickBooks very much has a foothold here.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So talk about other, we talked about, so talk about kind of the add-on apps, and, what other things are people using that our listeners might be interested in?
So, broad strokes, right? Just other software apps that we'll find in a law firm. Trello is really popular. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a Kanban style management, task management system where each task has a card. You can attach checklists to do certain things to cards and things of that nature. That's a really popular thing in small firms to do that, to get that result. As far as other software apps, Office 365, QuickBooks, LeanLaw,
What do you,
depending on the firm, maybe they have a different voice over IP, telephone solution, which there's many, right? Even now at this point, Office 365 offers that, and it integrates with Teams. And outside of that, there's just different case management, right? So like a lot of personal injury firms use FileVine as their product. And
fix this. What I want to do is
that's
just
off the top of my head. That's what I got.
Yeah.
There's a bunch out there, but most common is seen in real life. Those are the common things.
So I was curious about payroll. So what do you find at law firms? Are they using software for payroll, or are they doing it manually? Or are they using QuickBooks
so
payroll?
speaking from my experience, right? I have clients that use LeanLaw, right, through the compensation reporting and distributions module, and that's been a great thing. But outside of that, they use any ADP, Paychex, any of the big name payroll processors. But that's just getting the money from one point to another and reporting on it, right? It's
Right.
What do you type into Paychex to pay somebody, and how do you know that it's right? And that our experience has been that it comes from LeanLaw.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, as a SaaS company, we use those types of tools for everything. So we use Gusto for payroll. We use Ease for our benefit program. We use Ramp for expense management. So there's a tool for everything, and I was curious if any of that is starting to filter into law firms, because I think there's a lot of potential to save a lot of time in the back office.
Yeah. It depends, right? For a small firm, right? Like a 1 to 15, you're not getting some, people are they're just submitting, an Excel sheet with their mileage or, very basic one-off expenses.
Right.
But yeah, I think we'll definitely see the landscape change with that,
Hmm.
more of those apps will become more common.
Awesome. Any other thoughts about, great apps for law firms?
Um, Nothing we haven't discussed off the top of my head.
Okay. I have a couple other questions, but we're into the question
Yep.
part of the program. So, Allison, what questions do we have from the audience?
Yeah, so we got a question. It says, I work for a firm old and stuck in their ways. How would you help facilitate that?
So provided that's possible, right? Because some people are just totally set in stone. I would look to not just speak in terms of, gigabytes and megabytes and, apps, but to try to show the business what it can do for them, right? In terms of, okay, I'm employing a full-time person to do my bills, right? Or, 2 full-time people. Well, that could be, right, depending on where you are in the country, that could be 40, 50, $60,000 more even, plus benefits. So, if you can employ a software tool, make it less error prone and automate a lot of work, then that translates into dollars. And that's how I would present it to a firm that didn't want to change.
So just out of curiosity there, who are you usually talking to? Who's your audience for that? Is that the managing partner? Is that the office manager? How does that
Yeah,
work?
I've been fortunate in that, I typically will get an audience with the managing partner most of the time, but in the event that I don't, it's the office manager, and if not directly, to a stepping stone to the managing partner to have that conversation.
How do your conversations differ to an office manager versus a managing partner?
Um, I think it depends. Because you might be dealing with a 30-year-old office manager and a 65-year-old managing partner, so it can be a little all over the place. But when it comes to like everything we've said here, right? It depends on the firm, but it mostly comes down to dollars and efficiency when you're talking to the partner.
Hmm. Hmm. What other questions do we have, Allison?
We have one that says we're on QuickBooks Desktop. What does a transition to QuickBooks Online look like?
So it's not that bad at all. If you're on desktop and you need to get to online, Intuit wants that, right? They want that subscription payment every month. So they want to make it as easy as possible for you to get from here to there. And so any accountant or us or whoever can help you get from A to B. The only part to be trepidatious or anxious about is a lot of people who are still on QuickBooks Desktop only know QuickBooks Desktop. So you want to invest in training and spending the appropriate time to make sure whoever is responsible for your books, really knows what's going on and can work in online.
Yeah, we certainly hear that from time to time, like desktop, you could do it this way, and we can't do that anymore. We're
Yeah.
really tied to some feature or other. So
Yeah.
yeah, that transitional training is really helpful. Allison, are there other questions?
There's one more. It says, with all the apps you use, what do you do to make them secure?
So wherever possible, two-factor authentication, right? We always want to turn that on and have that, be be in place, right? And then second to that, but not a little bit further from the direct question that you asked, to use a password manager. So, if I have 100 passwords, right, and I have a solution like Keeper or 1Password or any of the other ones, that's going to enable me to have a complex, unique password for every single thing, and limit my risk if one of those things gets compromised in any way. So yeah, it would be 2FA, two-factor auth, and using a password manager.
We have
Well,
one more. Oh, yep, one
go for
more.
it.
Okay, so this person wants to know, on-prem to cloud migration sounds like it's a lot of work. Is it?
So that's a big moving target, right? But it doesn't have to be. It really depends. It depends how big you are. It depends how ingrained you are and the workflows of the on-prem solution. But it's an effort in adopting the new solution and planning, more than just necessarily going from one to the other. It requires planning and buy-in from everybody for it to be right.
Yeah, my own firm is going through that right now, and they went from a server-based version of it's a 40-lawyer firm, went from server-based Microsoft application to MS 365, and what made it possible was staging. Right. So it started with that. Then now they're going through the second stage, which is related to iManage. And I think it's called Work 10. Is that the latest version of that?
I think so.
Yeah, I think in a larger organization, it seems like, taking one bite at a time is pretty important, not getting in a rush.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so if that's, I have a couple other questions, if that's everything from the audience.
Yeah, that's all the questions we got.
Okay, great. So I just want to, wonder what your advice is for law firm owners and operators who, about setting up their tech stack and how they should think about that. Is there anything we haven't talked about already that you would want to say to those folks who are in technology transition?
Nothing new, but just to really underscore the importance of the last thing you said, which is that the planning and the staging aspects are so important, right? And you want to use a vendor that you trust, because you have to remember that the companies that are selling you this solution, right, they want to sell it to you and be done, right? So their milestone is, I sold you the product. And there's a lot more that goes into it when it comes to implementing it. And maybe everything they said sounds great, but you don't want to learn in practice that it's not what you thought, or that you move things too fast. So always doing a slow, staged, metered approach to things like this is the way to do it.
No, I appreciate that. Yes. So just to change the subject a little bit, you obviously know a lot about law firm applications.
Mhm.
How do you learn about new apps, new tricks? I mean, how do you build your knowledge base?
So a lot of it just comes from going, just being involved with the clients, right, and listening to their problems and seeing what they need. But beyond that, we're involved with some local bar associations, and doing, putting on CLEs, and learning about the issues that the smaller firms care about right now, and trying to tailor around that. But beyond that, there's different, any social media, right? If they come out with new announcements, or industry specific forums or groups on Facebook where they talk about these things, we'll find out things that way.
Right. So what do you see, say 5 years from now, what does the law firm tech stack look like?
So definitely Office 365. I don't see that going anywhere. A time and billing platform that includes a lot of automation and error reduction. And then outside of that, I think AI is going to find its way into a lot of due diligence and data room negotiation stuff, a lot of repetitive tasks or research as it gets better. We're by no means are we there yet, but I think that a lot of that manual work, or work that was previously done by first years or very low people, will probably be automated away, and then more competence, right? As a new generation of lawyer comes in, more technology forward attitude towards the firms they're running.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and something we notice a lot is there are distinct differences between generations when it comes to tech.
Yeah.
You get somebody my age, I'm early 60s, it's just like, I don't want to change. I
Right.
had done this forever. I'm going to just ride this out and retire.
Right.
And then you've got more of the Gen X attorneys who are, more competent, but, not necessarily tech natives. And
Right.
they have a certain approach to technology that, is more receptive, but still, I'd say, it doesn't take full advantage of technology necessarily. And then you've got younger, millennials or even Gen Z lawyers who are going, what are we doing here? I can't,
Right.
they can't believe how manual everything is in the law firm. So I think that generational shift is it's like the dawn. You don't,
Yes.
it's not like an instant cutover, but you can definitely see it's coming and will change everything over
Yeah.
the next 5 to 10 years. So excited to be part of that.
Yep.
One last question is, as we build software, like user feedback is really important. We work very hard on getting back to our customers, what's working, what's not working, how do we make it better? How does that work in your business? I mean, you go and install things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know if it's working?
So that's a great question. And so, for our clients, it's really two ways. So we try to look at things quarterly with them and sit down with the managing partner and, the leaders of the business to look at, well, how many tickets did we get? Right. How many tickets did we get this, during this review period? And, what were the common issues, right? Because that paints a picture, right? If we got 10 tickets from one person who can't work in Adobe, right? That's going to tell me that we probably need to do some training on Adobe. Or, if they're still using on-premise applications, but there's all these issues around work from home, then, we need to steer the ship in a different direction, right? And try to alleviate some of that, because the way I think about it, right, is when you're in a business, especially when you're in a law firm, every single thing you do in some way or another costs money. So you can almost always tie it back to dollars, depending on, where the issues are and what the people are seeing. And, another thing, not to backpedal too much, that I just want to add is, if you're a firm who is, the leadership is on the older side, and you understand that there's a new generation of lawyers coming in that think a different way, and they don't want to do things with paper, or they won't, right? It's not just a question of what technology are you using. It's going to be difficult to retain talent if you don't, right? You want to have modern systems that the people that are coming in are comfortable with, know how to use, and that you at least have the appearance, right, of being a modern, forward-looking law firm, in order to retain that talent that is really, as you said, the dawn or the new wave.
That's a great point, and a great point to end on. So
Yeah.
Andrew Schear, thank you for joining us on The Future Firm.
Thank
And
you.
we'll look forward to talking with you again.
All right. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.